we wanted this to be an intimate, interactive, and transcontinental group. In content and structure, the course was intentionally and knowingly ambitious. We set out not merely to critique colonial logics within research methodologies, but to create and to imagine alternatives. So for us, we crafted the course as a journey, one that we were on together as we learn with and from one another. And we're very, very thankful to the students who were, enrolled in this collaborative course, who have, provoked new insights and really challenged us to rethink the possibilities for something like not only decolonizing research methods, but thinking about decolonizing pedagogies as well.
I'm assigning each one of you to be the keeper of the fire. The keeper of your own fire, the keeper of the fire of others in the group, and the keeper of that fire that is at the center of all of us. And why it's important to be the keeper of all the fires is because we are honoring the primary African philosophy of I am because you are.
Perhaps the first thing I would like to say is, to pay really homage to the accession made by Grossvogel, who asserted, I think in seminal ways that the university is the same wherever in the world one happens to find it. And, again, to pay homage to the work of Tuck and Young, who reminded us, of this very important caution that decolonization cannot stand for this, that, and everyone else, and fundamentally pointed us to, the fact that decolonization proper should be about recognition of dispossession, which continues in spaces like methodology as conceived and conceptualized and practiced in the university. So my participation in this course really is a defiant accession against, the accession that there can be no others. As well, in the university, people ask, how do we then decolonize? How do we re-Africanize? And for me, those were not idle questions. And I hope that with this course, we will then do that almost impossible thing of beginning to critique modernity using prescripts that are not of modernity.
Started by engaging music and having the power list that we will carry with us. And that was a really fierce start for a course. I've never had this before in any course that I attended, especially the course that has an academic hat.
And many people have shared some wonderful songs, so thanks very much for doing that and for making those available. And I mean, it's kind of inspired by the way in which Catherine McKittrick in particular has used song and speaks about a song and describes the ways in which music does these different things and can be this kind of window. So in a world in which the way in which we kind of do instructions and the way in which I did that introduction a minute ago is so kind of formulaic and sets out these certain things. We wanted to try and provide something different, a different kind of medium through which we might start to get a sense of the people here and something that you love to hear. And some people have kind of given some longer descriptions about their pieces, others have just kind of posted things.
Is it possible to decolonize university? Because university by its nature is a colonial construct. The name itself, uni, means one, meaning one way of knowing. So is it possible to decolonize the single story?
The thought processes that undergird everything that the university is about can be attributed back to conquest, and can be really attributed to dead white men from 5 countries in Europe, and how then by that conquest, the world became European, and everyone else was made to disappear through constellations of processes.
I think a big part of sort of like coloniality is the hegemony it has, or rather how it sort of like gives power to certain institutions, to have hegemony over what they consider to be, valid, for example, knowledge production as only valid if it is through the academy, and anything outside that is not necessarily valid because somehow we can't cite people, we can't, talk about how they followed a particular sort of like scientific, method to collect that data and all those things. This very capitalist abstraction that comes with how we do research in the academy and such.
I think the practice that we think of as exploration in contemporary times can be traced back to the sort of practice of traveling to other places in order to classify the many living things, which is on the one hand plants and animals, but also other human communities. The whole project of colonialism relied on the idea that the communities that lived in these places didn't have a sense of their own history.
This so-called penchant to make up people, like a conjurer, a magician who says, I've discovered a people and this is who they are and this is what they are.
Which already tells us a little bit about a set of political agendas that explorers took with them when they went to these so-called unknown places.
Halford Mackinder, the founder of Oxford School of Geography, promoted geography as an imperial subject. Mackinder's ideas about the geographical strategy of the empire contributed greatly to the development of geopolitics, an applied academic study that has served the cause of various empires.
We'll be joined later with a student-led initiative, which is called Uncomfortable Oxford, where we will have a digital tour and they will guide us through the city of Oxford, and we will see the landmarks that physically imprint the space of our city with the memories and the legacies of the University of Oxford's very close relationship with British colonialism.
Such a conjurer takes upon themselves the authority to be their voice through which people come to be known.
British anthropologists did in South Asia in the 19th century was to make the argument that there were certain communities, typically indigenous as well as lower caste communities in South Asia, who were naturally prone to forms of criminality.
A growing number of scholars writing from decolonial Black and post-colonial perspectives are thinking about how we might, in some ways, engage in a process of what you might think of as counter-conjuring, right? So conjuring against the kind of grain of this sort of logics.
What we're saying is, no, this is a kind of radical, orientation towards what would be dismissed as utopian or romantic, but we're willfully and knowingly engaging in that kind of speculative, that kind of imaginative project.
A geographer has written quite substantially on participatory research and what that entails. And I think there are forms of participatory research that engage in decolonial projects, and there are others that can be as extractive and as exploitative as other forms of research.
We see knowledge as an individual scholar going there, getting the interviews, getting the narratives, all paper, all there, nothing in the body that moves. So, and what happened? By doing that, we recreate an extraction, as we know, and this is obviously colonization. You could close your eyes, and I want you to start focusing on your breathing. There is a place that your body feels a bit oppressed. We're talking about the removals, a place you feel that a part of your body, part of your history, part of your culture is removed. How is your body?
Silence, stillness, solitude. Let that something which has been deeply buried in you reveal itself.
What do we say? This kind of spaces of working with theater all together, it's, as I called it, is a reparative spaces.
Willful optimism that even in the face of extreme forms of violence, we have to still carve out these spaces, and that it has to be collective.
And a space like this is a space that I think you should be grateful for, because you are beginning to break that cycle of pain that you carry.
We will perform the coloniality of your lives, you know, and then we will deperform them. Okay, let's go. Go. Okay, you turn your back. I want an image of coloniality, and I want to change to the image of decoloniality through your personal experience, through your education, through taking the language away, through being used. Yeah? Okay, go. This is my coloniality of experience. Go for it. Amber.
Can you hear that?
Oh, yeah. Breaking wall. Brilliant. Love it. We're performing it, Kagiso.
Imagination is a weapon, is a tool that we can use to reclaim and look at and reread and rewrite the narratives as the way we would like to do.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
Go. Say. You don't know what to say.
Who defines that this is knowledge and this is not? And what right do they have to define it as knowledge? Their knowledge as knowledge and your knowledge not as knowledge.
Exploration was fundamental, really, to this new way of producing scientific knowledge as something that was, distinct, something that was, seen as neutral and so on.
I did a whole master's in conflict, security, and development at King's College, and we never read somebody like Walter Rodney, you know? Even when I was doing my PhD in Cambridge, I don't think anybody then had put, and it was just the other day, Walter Rodney was not a text. People would still say things like, oh, he's too emotional. you know. So erasing that erasure even of Black scholarship that is saying the truth.
So knowledge is political, and the knowledge that we circulate and contribute to is political and has deep impact.
In Western society, the word knowledge is actually originally what it meant. Knowledge basically meant acknowledging the superior, somebody that is higher than you, or authority. That's what knowledge meant. The African ways of knowing, they are really a derivative of cosmology, as I already pointed out. There's always a link. There is that constant link between the knowledge of the cosmos and their lives on the planet.
As we know, most of Africa is all about Ubuntu, you know, I am because we are. So it's all about collectivity and collective activities and action. So I wanted to tap into that value as well. I wanted to be able to denounce any oppressive biases as much as possible as a researcher, and to be able to encourage democratic research decision-making. So not just what I wanted, but these are the people I'm researching with. What do you want? How do you want us to go about this? So that was important to me. And critical participatory research allowed me to do all these things. Hence, I engaged with and I dressed my participants as my co-researchers. That one action was a game changer for me, because they felt valued. They felt as if they were part of this thing I was trying to do, and it was quite important.
Different bodies coming together collectively to reflect and intervene as co-creators, not research participants, not research. We create knowledge. Knowledge is action. Go back to the body and extend that body, because this is what happens in othering. Our bodies shrinks, our bodies curls in, our female bodies, our racialized bodies, our migrant bodies, our queer bodies are shrinking. As Augusto Boal said, who is from Brazil and created the theater of the oppressed in the 70s, we need to demechanize the body, because the body is ascribed to everyday rituals of power. And what I'm saying is why this benefits decolonizing research knowledge and practice. Because the body is not present, the body. The body is omitted. However, the body is very vital. Gors says there is a corporality of knowledge. Who is the knower? There is a body there of the knower.
Academia desensitizes emotions. It encourages people not to feel, mostly. So be aware of the crackling sound, the sparks, and allow yourself. If the fire gets too much, you might want to remove a few woods. It dies down, you might want to add on.
Growing up, then there's no idea or no option of even learning your indigenous language, believing that you actually have doubt in learning your own language. And that was my reflection. That was my reality. I got to high school and I still was in a high school that offered, yes, they offered this is Zulu. But I had been so programmed through primary school that when I got to high school, I didn't believe that I would be able to learn my own indigenous language according to the structure that, the curriculum requires me. But I speak it every day. I speak it every single day of my life. There is no conversation that I have that is not in isiZulu, except when I'm in the prescripts of, the academy. But I speak it every day. But then you are told that no, man, you have so much self-doubt that you believe that you won't be able to survive. And that's how I ended up doing Afrikaans. And again, that tool comes back to say, oh, but you speak so well. You speak your Afrikaans so well. And then you believe that my language is not really important if I can speak this foreign language so well.
I'm reminded by Mignolo's call to embrace a grammar of decoloniality. And I think that is critical because I think we need to understand the kind of language, what kind of language is needed, the grammar of decolonization that we can use to push back against dominant Western-centric narratives or ideologies without actually pitting one against another, because that's not the point of this anyway.
You are put into the periphery. Your being is put into the periphery. And then there are these little tools that are always used along the way to just make you believe that this is the right route and that your entirety is not necessarily important or valid at all.
There is an issue in the West about whether if you have an African sounding name in America, and if you have or an African American name, which is also distinct sometimes, you could be overlooked for jobs. The view for us is to stop this racism, is to stop this view that you have to change, this idea that you have to change your name in order to be accepted. We really need to be proud of who we are. And until we're proud of who we are and carry the names that we're given by our families and assert them, because names equal identity. And until we do that, we're never going to get respect.
And I want you to be aware of how it feels for you to be asked to be introducing yourself in your own language.
The sorts of conventions and hurdles that you have to, overcome to get into an internationally recognized English language journal is huge.
Just as there's problems with the traditional subscription model of journal publishing, which raises these horrendous paywall barriers to basic access, the commercial open access model anyway has flipped that so that there's a barrier to the author who has to pay to publish in certain open access journals. There's a bias against authors coming from Africa or from Asia or from Latin America. And now there's this additional barrier of the pay to publish model. This bias in the global literature potentially is getting even worse.
There are articles that show evidence that non-whites do not get cited as much as whites do. There's a new article that says from African Affairs that if they look at two journals, white women have been cited more than black people, but black people, especially based on the continent, when they submit, they are rejected, not because of lack of quality, but because of editors' politics.
To quote Piron and Mbara here, they said, if open access is to facilitate and accelerate the access of scientists from the South to Northern science, without looking into the visibility of knowledge from the South, it helps to redouble their epistemic alienation without contributing to their emancipation. Indeed, by making the work of the center of the world system of science even more accessible, open access maximizes their impact on the periphery and reinforces their use as a theoretical reference or as a normative model to the detriment of local epistemologies.
Universities in the West are starting to sign up to what is known as the DORA principles. I don't know if you've come across the DORA principles. It's a declaration on research assessment. So they have a declaration which is now accepted by some of the big funders in the UK, such as the Wellcome Trust. And the declaration say if you're reviewing grant application, if you're reviewing people's CV for appointments, if you're reviewing them for promotion, you should look at the quality of what they're doing. You're looking at the content, not where it's published.
You've got to know your field. You've got to know your epistemic community. You've got to make a case. So one way I make impact, for example, for me, I make a case and say, look at my articles. They've been downloaded 3,000 times in a year. People will download you, they will read you, but they'll never cite you. That is coloniality of impact. So don't be hungover explain and tell your story, even to that in your liberal institution. Tell it that there is an issue with minorities in academia and this is what is happening, but I can show you that I did not sit down and download all of this, that I have feedback from students from classes, that I'm invited to speak there. You know, you make your case.
Actually listening to what people say about their communities and what their concerns are can actually shape your research. You know, you will have come across sort of with the African-American community where there's a lot of literature on this. The concept of intersectionality you might have come across that came out of critical race theory, came out of black people theorizing their lives outside of the academy. You know, Alice Walker used the term womanism as well. And these have gradually been mainstreamed.
For me, that's the most important thing, was to be reflective. Where do I live with the people and what do they live within me? Because it's a very reciprocal relationship.
So much of my research has been reading papers, writing things, and I've not even lent into my creative practice, which is most of what I do.
It made me stop as well and ask myself how much of a punk I've been when it comes to academia generally, because I'm always reminded of how we're told that in my undergrad that the whole point of institutions like this is to create factory workers, whereby we're jumping from one station to the next station. And that is how I have found myself. That's how I think, that's how I write, and that's how I create.
You're carrying this exhaustion with you all the time. You can't even engage. Yet your freedom and survival is dependent on that engagement. We all know the pain of being unseen. We know the pain of being unheard. We know the pain of proving that you matter. And the beauty about not being able to translate something is a reminder of how diverse we are as a people. You kind of are reminded, right? That you are a drop in the ocean, but you're also the ocean.
People have come up with some really interesting language to describe their condition, right? And which is totally apt for the experience that they are encountering. Use that language, introduce it into the academy, just be creative.
Making movies, performance, expressive forms of art, things that needs to stretch the limit of the comfort level of a researcher, but at the same time, it pays back to provide an emic view, being part of the interactions that happens with the participants.
There's a Japanese art, which I always forget the name, where they kind of bring the pieces together, but they use gold. Oh, there you go, kintsugi. How did you know that I was speaking about that? And you are saying you are disconnected. Look at you, you know? You're not disconnected at all.
I invite all of you as people who are involved in knowledge production and consumption to, one, diversify your reading. Academia is a place of discomfort. So be ready to be uncomfortable. And finally, everything you produce, try to make it as accessible as possible. Translate things into your local language. If you can't do it through writing, when next time you go to do work, go and speak in that local language about your findings, about that community, or get a translator and do it.
The thing that dawned upon me, despite this being the final lecture for session, it's not linear. I mean, this entire process, it doesn't really have a telos. And that's what makes it so beautiful, because in a weird way, the ways in which European modernity broke the circularity of African cosmology, the circularity of this pedagogy is breaking the linearity of the institution.
Don't think that we think that this is the roadmap or the rubric for what things should look like.
It's been so humbling, really, to be with you all the time. At first, I was very happy to see, the South African voices coming to the fore. And yes, we have come full circle, guys. From me, I would say that let's keep, moving from a place of love, rather than that of fear. My voice is fading, guys. At the end of the day, we are happy with what we do. Thank you.
Mbolo